You won't believe who just saved a $130 million warbird with a wrench older than your car. When a grounded jet defied every diagnostic, the military called in their best techs, but it took a retired legend in a denim jacket to hear what the sensors couldn't. What happened next rewrote the rulebook on modern aviation. You could smell the disbelief before you heard it. Hot coffee, cheap aftershave, and that air of smug superiority that only came from someone who thought their rank made them smarter. "Ma'am, are you lost?" the young tech barked, eyeing me like I'd wandered in from a time warp. "This is restricted. We're not running tours today." He wore clean fatigues, a crew cut too sharp to have ever seen dirt, and a tablet clutched in one hand like it held divine truth. His name tag said Rogers. His smirk said trouble. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. I stepped into Hangar 6 of Falcon Ridge Air Base, steel and sunlight spilling in through the open doors behind me. And there she was, the bird. F/19 Reaper class twin-engine jet. Number 841. A machine designed for war, grounded for 3 days straight. Too advanced for half the crew to understand, too proud to tell them what she needed. They'd called in a Tier 4 system specialist. They got me instead. Rogers let out a sharp laugh. "You're kidding, right? We asked for a diagnostics expert, not someone's grandmother in denim." I ignored him. My boots echoed off the concrete as I walked forward. Slow, steady, the past clinging to every step. The crew, barely out of tech school, shifted uneasily, watching like I might burst into dust any second. I didn't look at them. I looked at her. She wasn't dead, just misunderstood. "You'll need to wait by the entrance, ma'am," Rogers said with forced patience. "This is an active maintenance zone." "What's she saying?" I asked, voice low. Gravel-worn from years of jet noise and too many missions scrubbed from records. He blinked. "She? The aircraft? Lady, it's not saying anything. The ECU's not syncing. The pressure relays are all throwing faults. The whole data bus is jammed." Too many acronyms. Not enough listening. Rogers moved to block me. "I need credentials before you get any closer." I pulled the ID from my back pocket. Faded, cracked, old enough to have seen action. He stared at the name. "Evelyn Shaw, civilian consultant." "That can't be right," he said. "It is," I replied. He snorted. "What are you going to do? Talk it into flying again?" I set my worn canvas tool rolled down on the bench. Rolled it open. The room quieted. Tools, darkened by time. Familiar. Trusted. "I'm not here to talk to her," I said, reaching for the bent torque wrench I'd shaped myself back in '93. "I'm here to listen." Rogers pointed at one of my old wrenches, twisted and burnished from decades of use. "That thing even meets safety specs?" he scoffed. "Where'd you dig it up, Antique Roadshow?" "Made it myself," I replied without looking up, gently selecting another tool. When the standard kit didn't do the job. One of the younger airmen, Martinez, I think, leaned in to get a better look. His tone was hushed. "Is that hand-forged?" I heard the shift in his voice. Curiosity was breaking through the ridicule. Rogers wasn't done. "This jet runs on multi-phase diagnostics, ma'am. Neural-linked flight assistance. You're not going to knock sense into it with medieval tools." I knelt beside the Reaper's landing strut and ran a calloused hand along its frame. Cold metal met warm memory. I'd known this jet type since its prototype years. Helped write the damn maintenance doctrine before half these kids were born. "She's not broken," I murmured. "She's stuck. You've been running code when she needs context." Rogers groaned. "Please step away. If something goes wrong, that's on me. You're not cleared." "Already am," I said, patting my breast pocket. "General Duclair signed it personally." That shut him up for half a beat. "Ma'am, no offense, but I don't care what a general says. I trust the data. And the data says this bird's dead weight." That was when the hangar lights blurred around me. Not from age. From memory. In my mind, it was Kandahar again. Summer of 2011. We were 3 nights into blackout conditions. No support. One Reaper's avionics had failed mid-rotation. They grounded her, said it was a lost cause. But I knew better. The bolts had been over-torqued during a heat swell. Just one adjustment. Just one touch. I'd crawled under her wing in 117-degree heat, with only a flashlight and a dented gauge. I'd calibrated myself. 47 minutes later, she screamed to life, took off at dawn, and delivered payload across hostile terrain with 0 deviation. I blinked back to the present. The crew was still watching. I've seen jets like her fake their own death, I said, tapping softly at a panel beneath the left nacelle. But if you really want to find the fault, you have to get your hands dirty. Rogers crossed his arms. And if you're wrong? I looked up at him calm. Then I'll walk away, and you can keep guessing. Silence stretched. Then a voice cut through it. Rogers, said a woman standing just inside the hangar's far entrance. Airman First Class Lien, from Logistics. You should let her try. Rogers frowned. Why? Because, she said, holding up her tablet. This is Evelyn Shaw. She reverse-engineered the bypass schema for the Delta 7 bleed valves, by hand, during Operation Nightchain. That's her signature in the technical annex. Rogers' face drained a shade. She's the reason these birds don't fall out of the sky when pulling 6GS. I gave him a small smile. Now, I said, pulling my sleeve back. Let's wake her up. I worked in silence, the kind that says more than 1,000 explanations ever could. The younger crew backed off, giving me space. Not from respect, at least not yet, but from uncertainty. They weren't sure if they were watching a master at work or a relic playing pretend. Rogers stood stiffly near the diagnostic station, still trying to maintain control of the scene. But his eyes never left my hands. The tools slid into place like they'd waited years to return to this aircraft. I loosened 2 bolts and popped the auxiliary panel near the hydraulic reservoir. Not the fault they'd been chasing, but the one they'd missed entirely. A faint scent of scorched lubricant wafted out. There it is, I said quietly, almost to myself. Rogers stepped forward. That's not on any of the flagged zones. I looked up at him. Because your sensors don't know how to interpret subtle bleed. Pressure reads nominal. But the actuator's support bracket? Sheared microfracture. It's vibrating at just the wrong frequency when the APU spools. Wait, harmonic resonance, murmured Martinez, now crouching beside me, eyes wide. Exactly. The tremors throwing off the startup sequence. The system doesn't know how to report something it wasn't designed to feel. Rogers opened his mouth, closed it. I handed him a flashlight and pointed to a hairline crack nearly invisible to the naked eye. Check it yourself. He leaned in, silent for the first time in 10 minutes. When he pulled back, he looked shaken. That shouldn't even be possible. I gave a small shrug. It shouldn't, but it is. With practiced care, I reached for a torque wrench, my own, not one of theirs, and made a single, precise adjustment. The kind you don't find in a manual. Rogers stared at me, then at the aircraft. You really think that's it? He asked. I didn't answer, just turned and nodded at Martinez. Run the sequence. APU only. Don't prime the main turbines. He hesitated, then jogged toward the console. The whine of the auxiliary power unit filled the hangar, an eerie, rising sound, familiar and dangerous. This time, it didn't stutter. No fault codes. No emergency cutoff. Instead, the Reaper hummed to life, steady and strong. Rogers just stood there. That's not possible, he whispered again, softer this time. I turned to face him fully. You keep saying that, I said, voice low but firm. But maybe it's not the plane that's the problem. Maybe it's your definition of what's possible. The hangar had gone silent except for the steady thrum of the revived jet. That was when the base intercom crackled overhead. Command to Hangar 6. Stand by for high-level inspection. General Collins en route. Rogers paled. I rolled up my tool wrap, calm as a sunrise. Better make room, I said, brushing a fleck of dust from my sleeve. Sounds like someone up top wants to see who actually fixed their warbird. The overhead doors creaked louder than usual as they opened, just enough for sunlight and trouble to pour in. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop just outside the hangar. The kind with no plates, no names, and every clearance badge known to man. General Amelia Collins stepped out first. Sharp uniform, sharper eyes. Every movement of hers told a story. Lead from the front, question later. Rumor had it she once flew a crippled C-130 through a storm to deliver wounded personnel, alone, with 2 dead engines. Today, she moved like she still had wings. Behind her, Colonel Roth followed, tablet in hand, lips tight. Both of them scanned the hangar as they entered. Every technician snapped to attention, boots clicking against the floor. Rogers fumbled with his radio. Sir, ma'am, welcome to Hangar 6. We've been running diagnostics on. Save it, Collins said without looking at him. Her gaze had already landed on me. Evelyn Shaw. I gave her a quiet nod. General. For a heartbeat, the entire hangar froze. Then Collins raised her hand and saluted. Not casually, not out of protocol, but with the crisp, deliberate sharpness of someone who understood exactly who she was facing. I returned it slowly. My salute wasn't military anymore, but the weight behind it hadn't faded. Roger's mouth parted slightly. Ma'am, if I may, she wasn't on the list of authorized techs. I tried to keep her back. Did she fix the bird? Collins asked without breaking eye contact with me. Yes, but that's all I need to know. Colonel Roth handed her the tablet. She barely glanced at the display. This aircraft's been grounded for 72 hours. 3 potential deployments compromised. Engineering flagged it for parts replacement. She turned toward Rogers. And yet a mess. Shaw walked in here with tools older than you, adjusted a microfracture that diagnostics missed, and brought her back to life in 15 minutes. Rogers flushed crimson. Ma'am, I was following standard protocol. Exactly the problem, Collins said, stepping past him. You were reading a machine. She was listening to it. A murmur spread through the younger crew. The shift was starting, pride unraveling into something harder, something like respect. Martinez leaned toward me, whispering, You knew it wasn't the sensors. How? I nodded toward the bird. Because she told me. The hum wasn't right. She was trying to speak. Colonel Roth adjusted his glasses. Her credentials say civilian consultant, but her service record, it's handwritten. Collins looked at me again, her tone quieter now. How long since you've touched a Reaper's internals? About 7 years, I said. But I never really stopped. She gave a faint smile. You're still the best damn aircraft whisperer we've got. Rogers took a careful step forward. General, I wasn't aware of her history. No, she replied. But maybe it's time everyone learns it. She turned to the rest of the crew. Gather round. You're about to get the kind of lesson no simulator can teach. They circled in slowly. The mechanics, the airmen, even Rogers. No one ordered them to. They just moved like something sacred was unfolding. Like the hangar had suddenly become a classroom, and I was holding the chalk. General Collins folded her arms and leaned against the fuselage. Tell them, Evelyn. Tell them what it means to really know a bird. I stepped beside the Reaper, laying a hand on the composite skin just beneath the intake. You all think this machine is a sum of its systems, I began. Pressure points, voltage curves, sensor arrays. That's how they train you now. No one argued. They didn't dare. But what they don't teach is how to feel when something's off. When a pulse is 1 microsecond out of sync. When the vibration under your boots changes pitch just slightly, because something deep in her bones has started to crack. I walked slowly along the length of the aircraft, fingers tracing panels. This plane talks to you. Not in words. In harmonics. In heat displacement. In the way she holds tension in her frame when a bracket's failing. I don't just read her. I listen. Rogers shifted uncomfortably. With all due respect, ma'am, sensors are more accurate than gut instinct. I turned, locking eyes with him. Do your sensors account for a twisted strut flexing 0.2 degrees under torque at high altitude in -40 temps? Do they recognize when a bird's been overflown by a reckless pilot who rides her harder than her tolerances allow, but doesn't report it? He said nothing. Didn't think so. Beside me, Airman Martinez raised a hand, like we were back in school. Ma'am, how did you learn all this? I smiled faintly. Experience. Mistakes. A lot of them. I glanced at the general, who gave a nod. I used to crew out of Ironside airstrip in northern Afghanistan. Dust, heat, and nothing but ingenuity kept those birds flying. One Reaper came back with a tail control jam no one could figure out. Command wanted to scrap her. I tapped the tail assembly gently, but I felt the misalignment. Turned out to be a bent hinge buried beneath 4 panels. Found it by listening to the way the tail responded when I tapped it. Like tuning a piano in a wind tunnel. Someone whistled low. Rogers finally spoke, but softer now. So you didn't just fix jets. You saved them. No, I said, shaking my head. I saved the people who needed them. That's when the hangar went still again, because every one of them remembered what this aircraft wasn't doing just 30 minutes ago. Martinez spoke again. Ma'am, could you show us? Not just fix it, teach us. What to listen for. I nodded once, and for the first time since I'd stepped into that hangar, I wasn't alone with the machine. I had an audience, and maybe A few students worth passing something on to. I laid out my tools on the wing like a surgeon prepping for a field op. No screens. No diagnostics. Just steel, hands, and the feel of a machine waiting to be understood. Martinez stood closest, eyes wide with attention. Behind him, Rivera and Cho leaned in too, notebooks forgotten. Even Rogers hovered nearby now, posture guarded but no longer hostile. Start here, I said, tapping the panel under the port side intake. Place your hand flat. Close your eyes. Now knock once, knuckles only. Then once more an inch to the right. Martinez did it. Frowned. Sounds the same, he muttered. Listen closer. I moved beside him, knocked once myself. Then again. The second knock came back sharper, higher pitched. That's stress transfer, I explained. Means the underlying bracket is shifting under surface tension. The panel's holding, but the subframe isn't. Rivera tried next, and her head tilted. I hear it, she whispered. It's like a ringing. I nodded. That's the bird telling you she's hurting. Not broken, hurting. If you wait until she throws an error code, it's already too late. Rogers cleared his throat. They don't teach that in technical school. They don't teach this in school, period, I said. General Collins had stepped back by then, arms folded, watching without interfering. Her expression was unreadable, but I caught it in her stance, the same way I read planes. Shoulders loosened, chin slightly raised. Pride. Not in the machine. In the moment. I used to think I was just a fixer, I said, tracing a finger along the jet's dorsal seam. But these birds, they're more than bolts and wiring. They're muscle memory for the mission. You treat them like numbers, they'll give up on you. I held up a battered socket extension. This, I said, spinning it between my fingers. This got passed down to me from a tech who once rebuilt a B-52 with nothing but scrap and prayers during the first Gulf War. Said to me, don't trust tools that never got their hands dirty. Rivera smiled. So that's your toolkit's secret? I looked down at the worn canvas wrap. Every wrench and bit shaped by time and trouble. No, I said. That's just the legacy. The real secret's knowing when to use them. Behind us, the Reaper's engine purred and idle. Its systems synced, its faults gone silent. It was more than a repair. It was a reminder. You can learn procedures from a screen. But to earn the machine's trust, you have to feel her. And for the first time in years, I realized something else too. Maybe this wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was the beginning of theirs. The Reaper's idle hum still filled the hangar, soft and steady. You'd think a fixed jet would mean we all go back to business as usual. But something had changed. Not just in the aircraft. In them. Rogers had stopped trying to explain away his earlier mistakes. He stood quiet, listening, learning. Rivera and Martinez had started taking notes, not from a screen, but from each other. From me. From the plane. And General Collins? She didn't leave. She paced once down the length of the bird, then turned to Colonel Roth. I want this logged, she said. Effective immediately, I'm authorizing a trial program, legacy maintenance integration. Shaw leads it. Roth blinked. A trial? Not a trial, she snapped. A return to something we lost. She turned to me. We've got crews that can swap a flight control unit in 8 minutes, but can't spot a torque fracture by ear. That's not efficiency, it's dependency. I felt the weight of her words settle like dust on my shoulders. Heavy. Familiar. You want me back on base? I asked quietly. I want you teaching, she said. If you're willing. My eyes wandered back to the Reaper, still cooling down after her first startup in 3 days. She looked alive now. Proud again. And so did these kids. I'm in, I said. Collins nodded once. Roth will handle logistics. You'll start with Hangar 6, then rotate through the other maintenance bays. Rogers stepped forward, clearing his throat. His voice was steadier now. Humbled. Ma'am, I'd like to be part of that program. If you'll let me. I raised an eyebrow. Still think the wrench is medieval? He gave a crooked smile. I think it's smarter than I am. Fair answer, I said. General Collins stepped toward the hangar doors. I've got another base review in 2 hours. But I expect a full report on your first training session by Monday. Copy that, Roth said. As they left, Collins turned back for just a second. You may have retired from the Air Force, Evelyn. But the Air Force clearly hasn't retired you. And then she was gone, her SUV fading into the heat shimmer beyond the hangar. I looked around. The crew still lingered. All right, I said. You heard her. Grab your tools. We're not fixing anything today, we're listening. Rivera raised her hand. You're not charging us tuition, are you? No, I said. But there is a final exam. Martinez tilted his head. What's that? I pointed at the Reaper. When she talks, you'll know. The crew started moving, quietly forming a circle around the bird. And I, Evelyn Shaw, once written off, now teacher, stood where I'd always belonged. With my sleeves rolled up, my tools at my side, and my legacy just beginning. They were still hesitant at first. Even after everything, the young crew approached the aircraft like it might correct them if they touched it wrong. I saw it in their movements, too cautious, too clinical, like they didn't trust their own instincts anymore. I knew that fear well. Rule 1, I said, stepping beside the Reaper's intake. Don't treat her like she's going to break. She wants to fly. She's built to fly. All you've got to do is figure out what's stopping her. Rivera ran a hand over the fuselage gently. What if we misread something? You will, I said. That's how you learn. You listen. You feel. You screw up. Then you listen harder. Martinez crouched by the landing gear, ear close to the strut. What if there's no sound? There's always a sound, I said. Just might not be the one you're expecting. I taught them how to tap with knuckles, not fists. How to listen not just for the hollow tones, but the reverberation. That whisper of something just a little off, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Rogers asked questions now. Not to test me, but to understand. How did you learn this? He said quietly, one hand on a worn panel near the avionics bay. I thought about that for a moment. In silence, I said. In the hours no one sees. When it's just you, the bird, and the pressure to make sure someone else's daughter or son comes home because the system you checked didn't fail at 30,000 feet. That hit home. I saw it in their faces. I stepped back as they began working in pairs, rechecking panels I had already cleared, not out of doubt, but to hear for themselves. To feel. By the end of the session, Martinez found a loose stabilizer bracket not flagged on diagnostics. Rivera identified a warping issue on a secondary panel just by tapping and listening. They weren't just following a checklist. They were connecting. And when the Reaper roared to life a second time, smooth, perfect, grateful, I watched a quiet pride settle into the air like heat off a runway. Rogers approached me last, hands tucked behind his back. I thought I knew everything, he said. Turns out, I didn't even know what I didn't know. You were trained to trust systems, I said. It's not your fault. But now you've heard the bird sing. You'll never unhear it. He offered me a handshake. Not formal. Something deeper. Respect. And I took it. Because that's how legacies are passed on. Not with medals or memos. But with hands. And understanding. Word spread. Faster than I expected. By the end of the week, 2 more squadrons had sent over observers. Quiet techs who claimed they were just there to assist. But I knew better. They hovered near the edge of Hangar 6. Watching, listening, learning. The second training session started with 15 crew members. The third had 27. By the fourth, we moved outside. The hangar couldn't hold the questions anymore. Someone from public affairs came by, said the base newsletter wanted to run a feature. I said no photos of the crew, no staged poses. This wasn't about publicity. It was about paying forward. Every lesson I taught came with a story, not to entertain, but to anchor the lesson. Like when I pulled out a bolt that had stress fractures along its neck and told them about a night in Ramstein where that same failure nearly grounded a medevac bird with 2 wounded inside. They lived, I said, because someone back then paid attention, just like you are now. Rivera was becoming a natural. Her notes turned into diagrams. She started mentoring others before I even stepped onto the floor. Martinez brought in one of his old tools from home, his dad's torque wrench. Told me he didn't understand the importance of it until now. Rogers had changed too. Gone was the clipped arrogance. Now he asked questions no manual could answer. Do you think aircraft remember us? He asked once, during a quiet moment near the intake. Not the way we do, I said. But they carry us, in the tension we set right. In the fractures we noticed before they spread. General Collins visited again, this time with a Pentagon liaison. He never spoke. Just watched with narrowed eyes as the young crew worked on a simulation bay I had retrofitted with audible fault variances, tones only human ears, not diagnostics, could decipher. After the session, Collins approached me alone. You've done more in a week than most initiatives do in 6 months, she said. You're changing how they think, not just how they fix. I smiled. Machines are consistent. People need belief. She nodded. The board's talking about scaling this program. I'm not sure I'm the scalable type. No, she said. But the way you teach is. Back in the barracks later that night, I sat alone with my canvas tool roll, wiping down each piece. They didn't sparkle. They weren't made of titanium. But they had one thing no fancy toolkit did. History. And now, they were writing new pages. Not with me. With them. The first time I saw the Reaper airborne again, it was dawn. Cool wind. Empty flight line. Just me and the sky waiting to be broken open. She launched clean. Wheels up like she remembered what it meant to trust. No stutter, no warning lights. Just that perfect climb. Martinez and Rivera stood beside me, eyes following the shrinking silhouette. Rogers joined last. Holding a coffee, he didn't seem interested in drinking. Feels different, he said. It is different, I replied. She's not just working. She's flying. After that, the calls came. Bases from other wings. Maintenance chiefs asking if Miss Shaw could drop by. Just to talk. To show a few tricks. A few lessons. Collins gave the green light for a formal rollout. Called it Echo Wisdom. I didn't choose the name, but I liked the sound of it. Every session started the same way. Not with diagnostics. Not with protocol. With silence. Feel the machine, I'd say. Close your eyes. What is she telling you? Some thought it was superstition. Until they felt it. Until they heard the faint off-pitch tap of a mounting bracket. Or caught the delay in fuel line pressure that no readout warned them about. And when they fixed it, that's when the belief started. I kept it simple. Canvas tool roll. Grease-stained flight suit. No speeches. Just stories. Just truth. And somewhere along the way, they stopped calling me a consultant. They called me Instructor Shaw. Chief, sometimes. But the name that meant the most? Ma'am. Not out of obligation. Out of earned respect. A few months later, I was sitting in a roadside diner just outside the base perimeter, sipping burnt coffee like always. The bell above the door jingled. I didn't even have to look. I knew the rhythm of that hesitation. Rogers slid into the booth across from me. No uniform. Just a plain polo and a face with fewer doubts. Mind if I sit? He asked. You already did. He smiled. I was hoping he paused. You tell me about Ironside. The hangars. The ones that didn't have power. How you kept birds in the air out there. I leaned back, cradling my mug. Well, I said, that all started on a busted strip near the border. No spare parts. Just red sand, noise, and one socket wrench that rattled every time I turned it. He laughed softly, and I told the story, because that's what legacy is. Not medals, not plaques. Stories passed hand to hand like a screwdriver. Held. Honored. Continued. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.